Hey, it's Jason Chung here, one of the original game developers at LSS, and today we have a deck test for ProQuest featuring Levia, Shadowborn Abomination. Today we're going to be looking at a top 8 from Battle Hardened Atlanta from Thompson, and we're going to talk about why you should play Levia over perhaps other decks like KO and how it is in the metagame right now and how Levia's kind of developed over the years. So we're going to dive right into this deck list now. So Joel came top 8 at the Battle Hardened Atlanta. We're going to take a look at what he chose to bring and go along some of the card choices and also just talk about overall like what these card choices mean for Levia and how we're going to enact a game plan that basically will lead us to a winning plan. With the addition of heavy hitters, Levia actually got a lot of tools that were really important. It's going to have a lot more go again in the form of agility, but we'll get to that a bit later and we'll go straight into the equipment. Apex Bonebreaker. Levia used to be more centric around Gambler's Gloves, and it still can be against certain matchups. I'll try to talk about later. Apex Bonebreaker actually works really well with Levia's game plan because paired with Carrion Husk as well as Scabskin Letters, Levia actually has what we call a fridge of just a lot of big defense value equipment. And right now in Flesh and Blood, it's very important to be able to defend against really strong attacks and really big pivot turns to ensure that like your opponent's not going to be disrupting your game plan too much. The addition of Apex Bonebreaker will also work very well, making sure that we just have like a good value plan. Dust to Dawn also brought us the addition of Levia Redeemed and Blastfit, which is crucial for Levia and making sure that we have really good late game where we're just not going to die to our own blood debt, and it is something that we're going to be trying to build towards in most of our games. To round things off, it looks like Joel also has respected the Kano matchup. Kano has been a deck that's been up and rising, and one of the key reasons you might want to actually bring Levia over KO is you're actually a lot more prepared for that in the form of what kind of is like Spell Void, but you have the Darkness package of Cloak of Darkness, Dance of Darkness, and Grass of Darkness, and these can stay in play until your Kano opponent uses Aether Wildfire, and it really stops Kano from killing you in a single turn. That's not something that many decks have access to. In addition, Joel has elected to use both Skullhorn and Spoiled Skull. I would say the Spoiled Skull is more for just a Fizzerai matchup or someone who's just going to be doing damage through Rune Chant, and you can be using Skullhorn as a way to combat the Kano matchup because you still want to be preventing with Arcane Barrier too. You can't just rely on your Darkness package in order to combat Kano. You are a deck that plays a lot of yellow pitches, just Brute decks will just utilize a lot of yellows, so you're fine with just playing AB2 in that matchup. You want to be setting up to play one card in a turn, such as like Boneyard Marauder, maybe like a Dread Screamer into a Boneyard. Something that's just you're not going for heavy damage, you're not trying to do more than 12 in a turn. What you're trying to do is set up, put some pressure on your opponent. Your opponent may choose to defend this or may choose to take the damage. If they're taking the damage when you do your final like really big turn, it's going to be very hard for them to conserve their whole life total. But if they're just defending, they're also just playing right into your game plan because that's going to allow you to fuel up your graveyard and you're not actually using any like really important cards in your deck. Levia is very, very strong against decks that have like an inconsistent game plan, and what I mean by that is they're not trying to do the exact same thing every single turn. Because Levia has tools to just be able to defend heavily, play one card hands, as well as just having a really good equipment suite in the form of Carrion Husk as well as other 2 defense cards. If your opponent's going to be relying on one big turn, you can defend it very very easily and still just have your whole game plan. So that is why I believe that Levia is much stronger against decks like Kano, Prison, decks that just don't like operate on like a very fair axis. On the flip side, I think Levia will struggle a bit more against decks that just want to do the same thing every turn, such as like Kasai or Dorinthia trying to use a Blade Runner and get Valiant Dynamo value every single turn. And if they're just doing the same thing every turn, your value of these big spikes of like the Carrion Husk and such, they will like give the same value every single game, and it doesn't have the same effect if you're just playing against these decks such as like Prison, or maybe even like a KO who's got like a big cast bone turn that you have to stop with like a cast bone into Command and Conquer. So we'll go in depth into each of the into the red. Endless Maw, Boneyard Marauder, and Hungering Slaughterbeast are kind of like your cards that you want to be playing like one per turn, but they also have their role for when you want to do a larger turn. These cards generally attack for more than what you pay for. For example, Endless Maw, you're only using 2 cards. You're using your blue and you're playing Endless Maw, and traditionally you're not supposed to be getting 9 points of value from that. So what you want to do is get as much of these like value turns where you use 2 cards, 2 card 9, 2 card 7, and that kind of bridges the gaps between your turns in Levia until you eventually go for like a really big turn. I see that Joel has elected to just play 1 Command and Conquer. I personally don't like Command and Conquer in my Levia decks, but I can also see certain decks playing up to 3 Command and Conquers because they are just a bridging turn. You play it and you just demand 2 cards from your opponent, and then we go on to the next turn cycle, and you're going to get ever closer to your big turn. And the only downside to something like Command and Conquer as opposed to like Boneyard Marauder or Endless Maw is you're not turning off Blood Debt, because Levia requires you to be banishing a 6 power card every single turn, and you may be taking a bit of damage, but you shouldn't be too afraid to take damage if you know you have a clear line to just win the game and ignore the damage. The other thing that Levia utilizes, and this is a bit unique to Levia but exists in other Flesh and Blood decks, is there are a couple of cards in Levia that just give you way more value than the rest of your deck. We're talking about cards like Art of War and Blood Rush Bellow, and you want to basically use these as a resource of, and you can't control this. It's going to be in your deck. It's going to be random. You're going to draw them at random times. But because you're applying constant pressure, you're going to eventually be getting some of these cards in your hand. You want to arsenal a few of these cards. Normally, this will be pretty fragile to cards like Command and Conquer or someone trying to stop your game plan with Leave No Witnesses. But this is where you actually will be able to utilize cards like your Carrion Husk, your Apex Bonebreaker, and defend very, very well to protect these key cards. But that's not enough to just have these key cards. How are you going to be utilizing it? So Levia is going to be trying to push through a very large turn, ideally something like 25 plus damage, if not more. And there's a few ways for you to do it, and it's about piecing these puzzles. The most obvious one that we're just going to talk about is a very simple, you're going to have a Blood Rush Bellow. You're going to play a Blood Rush Bellow. Would be very nice if it was also with a Beast Within. Doesn't matter too much if it's not. And when you hit your Blood Rush Bellow, you're going to attack with Mandible Claw. This is going to be for 5 damage. You're going to do it twice. It is good to note that unlike other decks in Flesh and Blood, Levia is one that actually capitalizes a lot on the go again component of Art of War. You're generally not attacking like 4 times plus like a Katsu deck. So Art of War is really here to just get some value from the banish. Usually just use Go Again, pairing with cards like Savage Feast to just like recoup the card and just be able to go wide as Levia. However, you do sometimes want to use it for the plus power if you know that you already have a lot of action points. Maybe you've got lots of Dread Screamers, or maybe you just rolled a 6 on your Scabskin. Joel has also elected to have the package of Tear Limb from Limb and Shaded Death Hydra, although only 2 copies of Tear and 1 copy of Shaded Death Hydra. This is something that can randomly just spike 26 damage out of Levia. Joel has also elected for the Smashback Alahorn, but only as a single copy. Cards like these are also just very good at just playing the game plan of not having to roll your Scabskin letters and being able to make an agility token, carry it over to next turn. Other options, if you don't like Smashback, it's also just playing the blue copy of Agile Windup, which is great because it's reducing the amount of non-attack action cards in your deck, both for winning clashes against Victor, but also more importantly, just you're going to draw some hands of just like all these blue cards, and sometimes you just have to attack with the card. Now that we've gone over most of the card choices and why Yol has decided to play these, I want to talk about each of like the matchups and what you generally want to be playing against Levia. But unlike other card games, Flesh and Blood is not really about just picking what hero you're playing against and just having a game plan against that specific hero, because each of the hero can also be playing a different like pace of the game. And instead of preparing for each individual hero, what you want to do is prepare for certain game plans and just group certain heroes together and just understand like the different paces of games you could be playing. So the three most common different paces of games that someone may be playing is they're going to be playing a very aggressive plan. They're going to be just pushing through damage. These are your decks like KO, your decks like Phi, and all they're trying to do is just like push damage and just deal more damage and take less damage than you. Then you have a more and this is also falls into the same as decks that just have good value proposition. These are your decks like Dorinthia and Kasai. What they're trying to do is also be dealing more damage and taking less damage, but they're more on the slightly defensive side, doing this with Valiant Dynamos, being very good at defending, and these decks are playing a really strong value game. Then you have your decks that are just going to be trying to completely defend you out, potentially even put you to fatigue, and they're going to try to stop everything that you're trying to do, survive all your turns where you're playing your power cards, and win the game that way. This is your decks like Bravo, your decks potentially kind of like Betsy, definitely Victor and Professor, just your decks like that, and Kasai can also fall under this as well as the value. Besides a bit of both. And then you have your decks that just do very inconsistent damage, very much like a combo deck. So the most obvious deck would be Kano. Prison also falls under this. Prison's also a little bit of a value deck. Levia is very much also combo while still playing the value game, and you're going to notice that a lot of these decks fall under multiple categories, and just kind of knowing how you want to play against these decks is just going to be very good when you're trying to learn how to play Levia. Firstly, the first genre of decks is going to be your decks that are just going to play a huge value game, whether they're very aggressive or not, and Levia is pretty decent against the very aggressive decks because you're going to be able to play a slightly better game against that. You have very strong defense value in the form of Apex Bonebreaker and Carrion Husk. You're just going to want to utilize the fact that you defend really well. Make sure you get your points of value when you can, such as defending with a 6 power card with Apex Bonebreaker. So you keep playing your 2-card 6s, your 2-card 7s, and potentially your 2-card 9s. And as soon as you draw a card such as like Art of War, Bloodrush Bellow, if your opponent's just playing a game plan where they're just taking damage, such as like a KO or Phi deck, just use these cards straight away. Just get the best points of value. You don't need to sandbag these cards and keep them in your arsenal to try to do a 30 damage turn. The game might be over before you even get these type of turns. You just want to be going for this. You also just want to try to take out the more fragile cards in your matchup. So these are cards like Howl from Beyond. You don't really want stuff like that. You don't want to play like the Hydras and stuff like Tear Limb from Limb. If you have stuff like Tome of Torment, you want to take these out in these matchups. And against these aggressive value decks, you just want to just play a game plan where you're doing similar things, but you have the upside of Art of War and Bloodrush Bellows for a really big turn, and you also defend quite well. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that you need to trade damage every single turn. The longer the game goes, the more Bloodrush Bellows and Art of Wars that you will draw in the game. If they're attacking you for 6 damage, and you decide that you're going to actually take the 6 damage and then fire back with another 6 damage in the form of like Command and Conquer or just like a Pulpin with no follow-up, you're actually going right into their game plan because their cards have the same value throughout their deck and your cards don't, you're trying to draw into your Blood Rush Bellow and Art of Wars, and if you make the game go as fast as possible, you're going into their game plan and you're just not going to see these Blood Rush Bellows and you're going to die beforehand. Now, the other value proposition decks are going to be the more defensive ones, such as Kasai and Dorinthia, and these are the decks that's going to be a bit harder to navigate because you're going to have to start to stack multiple of these Blood Rush Bellows and just do a really big turn. You're going to like commonly be attacking for 6, 7, 8, 9s, just 2 cards and stuff. You're also going to be pairing Dread Screamer and another attack and doing these 12 attacks. But your opponent's most likely going to be defending most of these attacks fully. So whenever you attack between 6 to 9, they're going to defend with 2 cards or so and then attack back, try to get some dynamo value. And when you attack for 12, they're a deck that can utilize just defend for 12. So how are you going to win this game? There's a few things that we can do here. We're going to be first and foremost trying to just set up multiple Blood Rush and multiple Art of War, but you also want to be utilizing some big turns without just Blood Rush Bellow and Art of War, because it may not be enough for you to push 40 damage when they're defending so much. What you want to be doing is utilizing stuff like Deep-Rooted Evil. This is a matchup where you actually would prefer to have like one additional card that you can play from your Banish Zone. In addition, you want to get the best use of both Spore's Skull and flip side of Levia Redeem, which is Blast of It. And you're going to want to set yourself into a situation where you can just start to play more than 4 or 5 cards in your hand, deal over 12 points of value while not utilizing too much resources. If you're using a Blood Rush Bellow in this matchup and you only did 18 damage in your turn and your opponent blocked 12 plus 1 with Dynamo, that's not going to win you the game because you're pushing 5 points of damage, then you've lost a Blood Rush Bellow and you do not have another 8 of these in your deck. You want to be pairing these cards. Don't be afraid to use Scabskin Letters even if you don't have a Gambler's Glove in play. As long as it's like paired with a turn that if you're hitting 4 or more, you know you're going to be doing at least 18 points of value, and that's how you're going to want to be pushing through these matchups. The upside to playing Levia over something similar like KO is these matchups where you can actually set up these really big turns. KO's kind of capped at being able to do Cast Bones to do the really big turns, and they can do maybe like 24 to 30 capped, but you are theoretically able to just do really, really big turns with Blood Rush Bellow, Beast of Fin, using Art of War on Slithering Shadowpede. So you want to try and play towards these. Luckily, these decks just don't really yield much disruption, so pretty safe for you to like set these up. Just ensure you kind of know what cards to pair with each other and to not just waste them to deal like not that like less than 18 points of value. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself very, very much fatigued in the game. Similarly, there's going to be some very defensive decks that also would operate on a value proposition such as Kasai and Dorinthia. However, we're talking about more decks like Victor, who's able to defend for more than 12 per turn, sometimes up to like 16 or potentially more, and this is not including equipment. And also decks like Professor Teclophosin, which is carrying over defense values from a different turn. So these type of decks are traditionally a little bit harder for us to combat, and the reason for this is, especially in a case like Professor, where when you're taking like a turn off, just attacking them for 6, they're able to then transfer another 3 points of value through playing an equipment or something like that to carry over to the next turn. For when you finally play your really big turn, they can combat that. Much like that, Victor is able to defend for more than 12 points of value, which is a normal defense value of a Fab deck. And if they're going to be able to shut down our like big Blood Rush Bellows turns with using a test, getting a gold, drawing a card, and just defending for like at least 16, it's going to be really hard to push through this. However, you want to utilize their weakness, and their weakness is they're not actually going to put that much pressure on. You can actually last through a lot of turns. Against these matchups, you want to make sure you don't put yourself into a spot where you can't just pass the turn without losing a lot of life to Blood Debt. And the easiest way to do this is don't be very aggressive with putting Blood Debt into your Banish Zone. If you put a lot of Blood Debt into your Banish Zone, you take out one of the most valuable tools against Victor, which is just passing the turn and giving them a 5-card hand. A lot of decks in Flesh and Blood, if you just give them a 5-card hand, they're going to be able to do a lot of points of value. But Victor, one of the best things they can do with a 5-card hand will be like a Spinal Crush and then a pummel, but really there is not too much that can really like punish you, and you have a lot of tools such as the Carrion Husk in addition to 3 more points of 2 block value. You can even run Crown of Providence in this deck if you want to, or just run this Crown of Fleshbag to stop the pummel. You have a lot of ways to just stop one of the big turns. So don't be afraid that on one of your turns to just have like, if you maybe have like an agile windup or way to make agility, and you just drew a Bloodrush Bellow, to just arsenal the Bloodrush Bellow, use something that makes an agility, just pass the turn, let them have their large hand, and then they're going to do some big turn like a Spinal Crush or something, but you have your Carrion Husk, you can stop that one big attack, and you are trying to really set up like a really big attack to go over the top of the 16 damage. It is not the easiest matchup, but if you're really comfortable playing it, you will have a strong edge against it, especially against someone who's just not used to playing against a Levi that's trying to set up really big. Now the next genre of decks that we will also play against is just inconsistent decks such as Prison, Kano, other Levi decks, and this is actually a place that you excel in. You are one of these decks that play very inconsistently, that can have really big spike turns, but you're also just very strong against inconsistent decks. This hero is very strong against decks that just want to do one big turn and that's it, rather than against decks that just want to do consistent damage. And the reason for this is actually your equipment suite, especially in Joel's deck's case. He has got elected for the triple darkness package, and this just excels against Kano. Kano's main game plan is going to be doing a really big Evil Wildfire on you, and you pretty much can just void that just by having this darkness in play, and it's going to be very hard for them to push it. In addition, if Kano's going to be just trying to do their like 2 card 5 damage, you can also play that game plan of 2 cards 7 damage, and you guys are just operating on very similar like matrices. However, you have way better defense against them and they do not have it. Likewise with Prison, one of the upsides to Prison is being able to break through 6 power cards. And Levia not only has heaps of 6 power cards, but it also just has equipment such as the Carrion Husk, and you can, against Prison, I would actually choose to play some of the Darkness package, potentially the legs and the arms. And the reason for this is if you are defending with a 6 power card to break it, if they have a card that basically minuses the power, whether it's they want to use their Halo or they're just using a card to minus it, you can still just use the darkness kind of like a pseudo reaction, and that really like stops their big turn. In addition, they don't defend particularly well because they will have a few no defense cards, and your game plan is just going to be like quite strong into Prison. They also just don't start on 40 life. You can just basically do half their life total with a very early Blood Rush. If there's a lot of Prisons in your metagame, bring it, and you don't want to bring KO, bringing Levia is a really great choice to combat Prison. If there is a lot of Prison and you want another Levia card that can be quite good against it, what you can also do is put Numbskull and use it only in the Prison matchup. Although Numbskull doesn't synergize very well with your Bloodrush Bellow, the unique thing about Numbskull is if they play Herald of Triumph, you defend with Numbskull, that's it, it's over. They can't minus the Numbskull's power to get through. You're going to be able to pop it with Phantasm. So that's another tool if you just have a lot of Prisons in your ProQuest. The last genre that I didn't really mention is kind of like Disruption, and there's very few like really focused Disruption decks right now. I would say like Azuria is probably the main one, but Disruption is something that just assists in our game, and many decks carry it, such as just the most common one running Command and Conquer. What Levia does excel at is decks that have a disruption effect that is inconsistent. So what this means is it's going to be like a deck that just plays Command and Conquer, maybe like a Spinal Crush, but most of their turn they're not going to be disrupting you. And Levia is one of the decks that just don't really fall to a single disruption every now and then. This is due to its equipment suite. Even if you have arsenaled a Bloodrush Bellow, your opponent can just playing a Command and Conquer, it's not going to be able to deal with it if you still have your Carrion Husk. And even if you do have don't have your carrying husk, you can still have 6 points of value through your other equipment. However, the decks that Levia may struggle against more would be closer to a deck like Azuri, where it's going to have a disruption every single turn with low damage output. So what are you going to do about that against someone with that? You're going to utilize the fact that Azuri has low damage output. So it's going to generally be doing very little amount of damage every turn, but it's going to carry a disruption effect. And how you want to be combating this is the whole game against Azuri, they're not going to have a disruption effect every single turn. There will be 1 or 2 turns where they just don't have one, and we're just going to wait for that moment. You're going to be very careful about arsenaling cards like Bloodrush Bellow and Art of War. You also got to be quite careful with them in your hand because of cards like Shakedown. If your opponent knows how to play against Levia as Azuri, they will nearly always name yellow as the color will Shakedown, and you need to basically be comfortable with just pitching your power cards of Beast within an Art of War and just utilizing it in second cycle against Azuri. Against Azuri, they're going to take a long time to kill you. They're basically going to be trying to get rid of your power cards, so you just want to be clean after your power cards. This is the one matchup you may just want 1 Remembrance just for your Bloodrush Bellows, but I wouldn't bother with Remembrance unless you know there's going to be a lot of Azuris or other disruptive heroes in your metagame. You just want to be utilizing the fact that your opponent's not going to be able to do much damage to you. You just need to make sure you always turn off your Blood Debt. That's actually what's going to cause you the most amount of damage when playing against a low output deck like Azuri, and don't be afraid to defend. We see that Yol actually has quite a good card against Azuri, which is Guardians of the Shadow Realm. It is a defense reaction that basically can assist through the entire game. You only need 1. They can't even get rid of it by banishing it off the top card of your deck, because you can just bring back Guardians of the Shadow Realm. So you can play a very long game against Azuri, and it looks like Yol was somewhat prepared for a deck like Azuri in the meta. So that just about wraps it up for just all of the matchups for Levia and a bit of the card choices. I think Yol's deck is very nicely built with just a lot of tools. He's definitely been thinking about multiple heroes in the metagame. If you want to take Levia, Joel's deck is a good starting point for you to just learn the deck's ins and outs. I would say Levia is one of the few heroes where instead of just trying to find the best possible deck, trying to find cards and stuff, you should actually just be like playing a deck, find the really good lines, and just learn how to play against every single matchup. Don't worry too much about, oh, I need to learn how to play against this specific hero. Just start to just learn different play patterns, learn when you're going to want to just play a lot of value, just deal lots of damage and not worry about setup, and just learn when you want to actually be setting up these like Blood Rush damage, Art of War, because the reason you want to be playing Levia over different decks such as like KO is you want to be able to utilize these really strong turns of Blood Rush Bellow, discard Beast within, same turn use Art of War, banishing Sliverpede. You want to be able to keep cards in your banish zone with how you can search for them with Shadow Blast effect. You just have so many tools as a Levia hero, and that's one of the best reasons for you to be playing it. You are going to struggle against a bunch of different decks. You're going to struggle with decks that just play big value like Dorinthia and Kasai. You may also just struggle against like random decks that just wants to play a very similar pattern, but you do have the upside of you are a less known deck. Your opponent might not know exactly how to play against Levia, and you are a deck that's just going to be quite strong against decks that just want to do one big thing. So like Kano, Prison, just decks that just want to do one big turn. Maybe like all-in Katsu deck that just wants to just hit with just one turn of combo. Hopefully you guys have learned a thing or two about Levia. I'm excited and hope some of you guys will be willing to bring this to your next ProQuest or even just an armory. Just get some reps in with the deck, learn to play all of the lines, and you'll have lots of fun playing this deck. It's unlike any deck in Flesh and Blood. This is one of the decks from the OG times one of the first 12 heroes that were in the game. One of the few heroes that basically taught me like Flesh and Blood is not just a linear game. It's not just about having a bigger number. There are a lot more to just hand-to-hand combat and to just be able to operate outside the norm of just dealing 12 damage a turn and being able to transfer resources, and not in an obvious way just like energy potion that people are used to, just being able to carry over resources from in the banished zone, potentially in the graveyard, and potentially just utilize where your Art of Wars and Blood Rush Bellows are in your decks. So I think that wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video about Levia. I am Jason Chung, one of the early game developers that also worked on Levia. Hope you guys will give Levia a go, and if you're unsure, just roll the dice.